All right. Well, hey everyone. Welcome to our chat on keys to a successful data governance journey. My name is Tassia Reinhold. I'm our Director of Sales for our Central region here at Alation, and I have the pleasure of being your host and MC today. I'm going to start by introducing Chad. Chad's going to do a presentation on data governance. We'll do a little bit of a fireside chat, and then we'd love to open it up to the audience for some Q&A. But I'll start by giving Chad a little bit of background here. So Chad has over 10 years of data and analytic experience with a proven track record of elevating organizations through data. He specializes in data governance and data quality, and has led major initiatives such as ERP implementations, implementing data governance frameworks, as well as different BI initiatives. Chad is currently the Senior Manager of Data and Analytics at Kellanova, formerly known as Kellogg's. So let's give Chad a round of applause and
Thank you.
Get him started.
Yeah, thanks, Tazia. Thanks for all of you being here. So as she mentioned, I currently work for Kellanova. Most of you probably know that as Kellogg's, based out of Battle Creek. I personally am based out of Denver, Colorado. So here from Colorado. So excited to talk to you about keys to a successful data governance journey. So in the morning keynote, there was a lot of topics talking about data governance, data quality, things like that. And I'm excited to expand on those, but then also give you my perspective on, for the last 10 years, I've spent time doing SAP S4 implementations. I've done MDM, I've done strategy analytics, I've done data governance, master data management. I like to think of myself as a Swiss Army knife in the data space. I try and be diversified in the experience that I can bring. And so, one thing that I always enjoy is doing stuff like this, is being able to share my experience and share knowledge with like-minded professionals in the data space. So, I'm gonna run through this. Like I said, we're gonna have a great fireside chat, and I really encourage you to answer or ask any and all questions. I'll be transparent and answer as much as I can. So this is something that currently we at Kellanova we have a profound impact on the business, and it's talking about the strategic pillars that we're communicating to the business that are empowering data governance. And so effectively, when we talk about these four pillars, a lot of this is stuff that you probably heard this morning, or, I'm not going to be telling you anything radical that you maybe don't already know, but I want to enforce the fact that this is happening at a company like Kellogg's. So, data transparency, starting as one of our first pillars. Data transparency in simple terms is who's using the information, how are they using it, where are they using it, right? So the transparency and the accountability of understanding who's accessing that information, how are they using the data, and are they using the data correctly? So, we are a customer of Alation, so we use Alation heavily in the space of data governance by empowering the documentation and the curation around our data assets and our data products, so that way we can communicate the data transparency, for example. Data accessibility is another big one for us, right? Do we have the right access to data? So you heard Shane this morning talk about social security numbers in HR, right? Same thing that we have, banking information on vendors, right? We got to make sure that we have the right access to the right data. Otherwise, we put ourselves in potential risk and mitigation. Data protection is another big one. So you hear the terms GDPR, CCPA, right to be forgotten. This is essentially much more present, especially in this cloud environment. The AI environment is protecting that sensitive information and ensuring that we are following all the protocols and the bylaws and things like that. So, and the last major one that I like to think about is data accuracy. Definitely last but not least, and it speaks for itself, talking about the quality of information and ensuring that the data that we have available is accurate, it's of high integrity, and we are using it in a way that is fostering business results. So this is just kind of setting the stage, right? So, but what I really want to talk about is my journey through data governance and what I've found to be keys to successful. So these are four pillars that we at Kellanova focus on. And then personally, I want to step through a few topics on where I found success. One of those being data culture maturity. So when we talk about data maturity, the importance of this topic being, do you recognize your organization's maturity to manage data, to use data, to consume data, to make data-driven decisions? Oftentimes, I hear people say, "Oh, well, we want to be data-driven." And my first question is, do you understand what that means or what it takes to be data-driven? Oftentimes, the answer is no, if I'm being transparent. So the way that I like to use a data maturity assessment is it tells you, you can assign it by different persona types, and you can effectively roll that out to say, okay, where are we today, right? What is our maturity? If our maturity is if we're a low maturity in the data analytics space, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say, how many of you in here feel like you are a mature data organization? Likewise. So we're all in the same boat, right? I think data and analytics is a very new, evolving topic. And so effectively what this does is it's not to call out an organization or a team or a person about the maturity level that they possess with their data capability. Rather, it gives you the perspective of where are you today, right? The benchmark of saying if you're a 2 out of 5 in the data literacy space, you know where you stand. But then it also gives you a perspective of industry benchmarks, best practices, things like that, of saying, okay, here's how the innovative companies are doing it with data literacy. So it gives you where are you today, where are you going, and then the most critical piece is how are you getting there, right? So it's awesome to be able to measure the maturity of your organization, but if you don't have the tangible steps of how you're going to mature, then effectively those measures are irrelevant. So we currently are using Alation's data culture maturity assessment to do this. It's a very simple, easy to use maturity assessment that we can run out to our business partners and effectively measure the maturity of our organization in things like data governance, data literacy, data search and discovery, data leadership. And effectively what we're doing is we're creating accountability within the business to understand where are we today, right? So in the age of everyone wants to go to Gen AI. Well, the first thing to do is to assess your maturity is, are you ready for Gen AI? Is your data ready for Gen AI? And I would question a lot of you to say, are you ready? Because I would say most organizations may not be. But there's concerted efforts to saying, okay, well, how do we get there? If you're not there today, how do you get there? And so that's a big thing for me that I think you have to be open to assessing your maturity at an organization for your data to know, if we want to do digital transformation and innovation, AI, automation, machine learning, LLMs, all the fancy, I call it the sexy stuff, right? I do the non-sexy stuff, but the advanced analytics, predictive and prescriptive analytics, you have to assess where are you today. Because if you don't, you'll never know your baseline of where you're starting, and then you also don't have a vision of where you're going. And most importantly, how are you getting there? So this is a big element that I like to talk. I talk quite a bit internally at Kellanova about, is assessing our maturity for different programs, different initiatives, different regions. And Gen AI is one of those big ones that's happening right now. Stepping through my last slide here, these are 4 steps in my opinion that can foster better data governance. Number 1 is business acumen. So how are you selling the concept of data? I view myself as a data salesman, right? My job is to sell the concept of how are we using data, how are we getting the most value out of data. But you've got to strip the IT lingo out, right? Oftentimes, generally speaking, we are IT professionals, right? And we like to get techie and software-y and advanced and talking about SQL and Python and things like that. And I can say your business folks are going to glaze over and you're going to lose it, right? And so for me, what I focus on is being able to articulate the message in a way that's consumable by non-data minded folks, right? These are people that, CFOs and your XCOM level, they know data driven or being data, but they don't need to know the technology or the techie piece of it. The second one being a maturity roadmap. So this one, I like to say, don't sacrifice long-term value for short-term results. So when you look at a maturity roadmap, right, if today you're in a reactive data space and you want to move to proactive, managed, or optimized, you have to be able to display that roadmap of, okay, how are we getting there? How long is it going to take us to get there? And what are the steps? Again, going back to that maturity assessment is, if we want to evolve, if I tell my leaders that I want to go from reactive to managed in the next 36 months, I have to be able to clearly articulate that to say, how are we going to get there? And how am I measuring the success of us moving from a reactive model to a proactive, managed, or optimized? So I found quite a bit of success there because it gives folks the perspective of that long-term vision, right? Like where are we going? Now, obviously there's short-term deliverables, like what am I trying to deliver this year against key initiatives and things like that. But my statement is I'm not sacrificing my short-term results for my long-term vision, right? The long-term vision is to move to a more data-driven, insights-fueled, faster time to insights company. So, Kellanova being one of the largest CPG customers in the space, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of insights, we have a lot of analytics that we need to streamline. And so having that maturity roadmap clearly articulates your ability to know, okay, where are we going, how are we getting there, and where are we today? The third one, data capability. So I'm not going to go too far on a tangent because I'll talk all day about this, but data literacy is one of the biggest things that I have found to either make or break an organization. So oftentimes I hear, I don't trust this report because the data is bad. Well, is the data bad, or does the user not understand how to use the data, right? Is there a lack of data capability? And so we have my colleague Gene actually is running our data capability session where we are teaching and creating communities of practice to educate folks on, I use the term teach them to fish, right? We're leading them to the water, teaching them to fish and understanding how to be data advocates, how to effectively articulate the data so we can say, if the data is bad, I hope that we understand, is it a quality issue or is it a literacy issue? If it's a literacy issue, we can use tools such as Alation, right? Where we have curated those data sets to say, folks should be more aware and alert of understanding how to use those data products, right? So when you go into the data marketplace, which we're implementing right now, a data product owner should be using tools like Alation to essentially create higher data capability and data adoption rates for their data products. The last one being a RACI model. The term accountability is one that is either really exciting or it's the bane of my existence, depending on the conversation. And so creating accountability about the responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed parties for a particular data set, an analytic product, a process, right? A process that's creating data, consuming data, things like that. So for me, this removes all question marks, right? It removes the question of, well, who owns that? Who's the data owner? Who's the process owner? Who's accountable for the quality of that information? Do we have data stewardship aligned? Do we have data stewards identified? And so with that, this effectively creates that strategic alignment to say, as we're communicating to the business, are we communicating in a way that's digestible? So summarizing a little bit kind of what I talked about here, the first thing is, business acumen. I like to refer to the book Working Backwards from Amazon, if any of you have read it, but being customer obsessed, right, is my ability to articulate in a message that's digestible by different audience members is going to determine my success. The way that I talk to our CIO and a data scientist against a supply chain analyst or even a supply chain director, those are 4 very different conversations. And I have to be agile in my ability to deliver the same message in different ways so that way we're all on the same page. The maturity roadmap, like I said, it gives you that long-term vision and that long-term success. And without that, I think you will struggle to gain the buy-in from especially executives, right? Executives want to know, okay, where are we going? What's our vision? What's our 3-year roadmap? What's our 24, 36, 48-month journey look like? And clearly articulating not just why are we doing it, but what are we doing and how are we doing it, right? You're bringing them along that journey with you. Number 3, probably my favorite, is data capability. I would say in the last 10 years, I've seen more data literacy challenges than anything else. There's this perception of the data's bad. And my first thought is, do we have the right literacy for that individual or that team or that function? Because more often than not, the data is probably fine. It's just a literacy problem. Now, there's also data quality that is of high importance as well. So to ensure that are we measuring and monitoring our data appropriately to say, okay, we have facts to back up the fact that the data is standardized against a completeness check, right? Is there data observability to check the table freshness, the pipelines, things like that? And then the last one being RACI, right? Creating accountability is super important. A lot of companies that I've seen, data is an IT-led element, or data sits in IT, which oftentimes puts challenge on you assigning those data owners and creating accountability in the business to say they are accountable and essentially responsible for their data. Now, IT or data may be the ones that are responsible for creating or operationalizing or doing the data services aspect, but there needs to be a level of accountability in the business to drive results and to drive engagement. So those are 4 of my high level, very, very impactful data governance steps that I believe have both. I've gone through the ringer, right? I have horror stories, but I also have success stories. So I like to be transparent that in my 10 years in this journey, I have had lots of failures. And I like the term is you either win or you learn, right? So you don't lose. You win or you learn. And so I believe my successes have come from my learnings in trying to navigate this very turbulent space. It's a space that I love. I spend a lot of time researching. I'm a CDMP, data quality and data governance specialist. I've change management, Lean Six Sigma. I've dumped my whole thing into this. I read a lot about this because I feel as though there's so much value that can be gained from data and analytics and being insights fueled. And so, I'm pleased to be able to speak to you all today about this. So, and I think what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little fireside with Tassia here, but I encourage anyone who's got questions for me, please don't be shy. If not, I'll start calling out random people in the audience.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. I think that was really helpful in terms of just some bite-sized digestible pieces and how you get started in something like this. So thank you for sharing that. Couple questions that kind of top of mind. I've been in this space for 10 or 12 years at this point, and I feel like data governance and even data literacy are kind of nebulous concepts for many. How have you made it real at your organization for data consumers?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think there's something to be said about the technology that you have supporting it. So, Alation, for example, the way that I sell Alation or I explain Alation to people is to say, if you are a data product owner or analytic product owner, what is your tier 1 service desk? What is your tier 1 support? Generally speaking, it's, hey, Tassia, I'm going to ask you over and over, hey, how do I use this? Where does it come from? What are the filters? What are the parameters? What are the steps in this? And so, bringing it to life for that customer by providing them that self-service curation of that information to say, okay, if you can answer all those questions in a tool like Alation that provides semantic search and some of these features, you effectively are freeing up that data product owner, that analytic product owner for more value add activity. And so the way I think we bring it to life is being very forward with giving them the information they need to be successful.
Awesome. Much appreciated. I think that visibility lens is very critical. One of the questions that I know we get asked all the time is, how do you garner leadership support for a data governance initiative within the organization? How do you get the leaders behind you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate success determining, right? If you don't have leadership support, you're not going to get budget, resources, or time. So for me, the way that I believe that I found the best way would be to identify the business value. So oftentimes I find data is a very, very difficult thing to measure, right? So you want to talk about from an executive level, they want to know top line or bottom line. Are we increasing revenue or are we reducing costs? Well, data is behavioral, right? Data is a behavioral change. And so the way that, you can measure success is to say, how has our culture changed? How has our maturity changed to create more data-driven insights? And so, like I said, you have to bring it to life to them. And you have to be able to articulate it with a strong business case and a business value to say, well, how are you selling data? What is the monetary value of data to your organization, right? You hear the term data as an asset. Well, what does that really mean to an executive? And I can say from my experiences, oftentimes it's misunderstood, it's misconstrued. And so what I focus on is being able to articulate the value of saying, for example, right? In the first 90 days of an average employee, they spend 100 hours searching for data, right? That means that they are searching for documentation, they're searching for dashboards, they're searching for reports, they're trying to find the people that understand the data to teach them. And I say, if we can reduce that by 50%, we can save $10 million, depending on the company size, depending on the number of employees, things like that. And that resonates with people, right? Because I've put a dollar figure. Now, you still have to be able to prove that, right? But you're gaining the attention and gaining the notoriety there of saying, okay, you can put a dollar figure to it, right? So if I say I can reduce the data search and discovery by 50% by enabling semantic search and on-demand capability, right? I'm not only speeding up the people that are searching for the data, but I'm relieving the people that are there to manage and support it. So, I think to get leadership support, you have to be able to articulate it in a way that's almost monetizable, which is not easy to do. So I think there's some creativity in there, and accountability as well.
Yeah, and that's I definitely agree, and it's like this balance of having the broader vision of where you're going while also getting those quick wins. Yep. So that you can prove value as you go. With Alation, we have both the data catalog maturity model, which is a free assessment you can take on our website. Takes 10 to 15 minutes. Highly recommend going out and checking that out. We also have a data catalog value index, which helps organizations with the ROI piece of it, because often if you can't put numbers behind it in an ROI, it's very hard to get the support to go and do these initiatives. So when you reflect back on your journey, I know you mentioned some war stories and things of that nature. Where do you feel like you've had successes, and where have there been some challenges along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably more challenges than successes, but I always like to put it in the triangle of the people, process, and technology. And I would say I focus 80% of my efforts on the people. I believe data governance is people governance, right? So you have to affect change effectively at the people level, right? Technology is there to support you from a functionality, and frankly, there's thousands of technologies that can support you. But if you're not able to have the right people in the right places at the right time, you're going to struggle to gain traction in your data space, right? You also have to ensure that your processes are in place. So I see a lot of organizations doing operational excellence, right? Trying to do process improvement at the same time of doing a data rollout or an ERP implementation. It's impossible. So making sure that you're setting the stage for being people focused, right? And I say customer obsessed. It's a term that Jeff Bezos uses, right? Starting with the end in mind is saying we're starting with the end customer, which is our internal customer, our people, right? What do they need to get out of this? What do they need to get out of the data initiative, right? If we want them to be insights fueled, if we want them to be able to be quote unquote data driven, right? Which I always laugh at that because there's probably 45 different definitions of being data driven. But for me, the biggest success and the thing I would say the most is focus on the people, because data governance is people governance.
Yeah, no, that definitely resonates. I tell our prospective customers all the time, like, our job is to make the most easy to use, piece of technology on the market from a data catalog perspective, but that's only going to get you maybe 50% of the way there, right? It's really about the people and the process that makes these kind of technologies and initiatives ultimately successful, and partnering with someone that kind of understands that and can be part of that journey on the people and process side, I think is critical.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to say, you know, a lot of people say, what's in it for me, right? Like why, you know, especially the business, they're going to say, well, I'm already up to here with current priorities, current initiatives, current responsibilities, to say, if I go to them and say, well, you're now a data owner, or you need to own data stewardship. Oftentimes they're going to say, well, that's additional work, or it's additional headcount, or additional effort, when in reality, it's just altering the way that they consider their day-to-day and their processes that they already manage to be data focused. And so you have to give them the, okay, what's in it for them? And that's where I think, you know, having that business acumen and having that roadmap and having that strategy gives you the ability to say, okay, well, here's the value, here's the ROI that you can get by being accountable for this data, right? Is, you know, it should streamline our insights, it should streamline our analytics, our Gen AI capability, right? All these things that you hear that are the cool, fun stuff. I always like to say I'm behind the curtain, right? It's a very thankless job, data governance, sometimes, because we're not the ones building these beautiful LLMs and machine learning models and predictive analytics. But without data governance, you will never be successful in that area. And so that's where I get passionate about educating folks on, here's what I've been through, right? I've been through the ringer over the last 10 years, good, bad, ugly, everything in between. And you know, I'm passionate about it because I realize the value that data possesses in every business unit, every company, every industry, is harnessing the power of your data truly does create ROI and create data as an asset, right? In my opinion, you could put data on the books, on the balance sheet as a depreciable asset, right? Because there's so much value to be gained from it.
Yeah, I liked what you said on, like, you have to have your message kind of tailored to different people. The story you're telling on the what's in it for them is different depending on who you're speaking to. And the overarching message might be similar, but really kind of honing that what's in it for me based on who that person is in the organization can change and vary. And so having someone like yourself who kind of can navigate through that in an organization is a critical piece of making these initiatives successful, because you have to tell that story a little bit differently depending on who it's to.
Yeah, I mean, we're all storytellers in this room, right? And being creative in the way that you explain it, and having that, I call it the emotional intelligence of understanding your audience, understanding your persona that you're speaking to, and being able to adapt to that. If you don't, I think you're going to struggle with gaining the alignment. If you get too technical, you're going to lose a business person. If you're not technical enough, you're going to lose a CIO, right? And so understanding how those messages need to be delivered is super important, and being a storyteller, right? Taking them on that journey with you. It's something that I really enjoy doing. Like, if anyone asks me to do a data governance presentation or to speak to someone, I'm like, absolutely. Let me figure out how I'm going to sell it to them, right? I feel like my job is to sell the concept of data governance to the business, to the industry, stuff like that.
I have a psychology minor, and I feel like there's definitely some psych part of it that's kind of fun.
Yeah, the human element.
So last question I have, you know, you've had the ability, you've had the opportunity to do this and launch these kind of data governance initiatives at multiple organizations. For an organization that's just getting started with data governance, as many in the audience may be, where do you recommend is the best place to start?
Yeah, start small. You know, as Shane mentioned, don't try and boil the ocean, right? Start with an MVP, whether it's a particular data domain, something like that. But start with you have to gain those quick wins and those advocates in the business. And so, again, being customer obsessed, focusing with the end user in mind, right? Your internal customer, what are they trying to achieve, and how is data going to support that? But then, like I said, start small. Don't boil the ocean. I've been part of many organizations where we tried to go too big too fast, and ultimately we failed. So, you know, starting small, getting a quick win, whether it's by domain, by function, by region, and then growing from there. And then have a outlook from a maturity perspective to say, okay, starting small, but how are you going to scale? how are you going to scale that to more regions, more functions, more people, more initiatives, more programs, and having that vision? Because again, like I said, you don't want to jeopardize long-term value for short-term results, but you have to start small with the vision for the long term.
Yeah, and I think finding the teams that are raising their hand the most, sharing the problems that they're having, asking for the data, they're often the best target teams to start with. And that's where a maturity model can help too, if you're able to disperse that a little bit throughout your organization and kind of see where different people are in that journey. That can help you kind of determine maybe where is the best place to start as well.
Yeah, I feel like a maturity model kind of opens the eyes to folks that may be naive to thinking, hey, we're more advanced in the data and analytics space. I would say if there's anyone in this room that's in an optimized data and analytics space, please let me know, because I'd love to talk to you, because I've yet to see it myself. But, and so I'm very transparent saying we are reactive at best, right? Or proactive, right? And it doesn't matter what the organization is. It's just having that baseline of saying, this is where we are. There's no fault in anyone to be reactive versus proactive versus managed, things like that. But it gives you that baseline of saying, okay, this is where we're starting. But then it gives you a trajectory and a path to say, where do we want to get? What is the industry benchmark for data search and discovery? Do we need stronger data leadership? Do we have the correct literacy and capabilities in place to allow folks to use the data? Do we have self-service analytics, or is it just a data puke? I call data puking where you take an Excel and you dump it into Power BI and call it a dashboard. That's not analytics. And so being able to assess, are you mature to, where's your maturity at? Where do you want to go? Like, where's the vision? And then tangibly, how are you getting there? Over the next several years, you have to be able to have key milestones, checkpoints to say, are we trending to becoming a more mature organization? And I think improving the maturity is going to be on every XCOM's level, their roadmap to say, how are we improving continuously year over year.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing all your insights. We'd love to open it up to any audience Q&A that you guys might have to ask Chad. Yeah.
So when you talk about data literacy and data culture, I'm curious what specific programs or initiatives you've used or seen used to create a more literate data community, or just more engagement and ownership for everybody over the data, and how you measure that success.
Yeah, so a couple areas that we've used: communities of practice, if you've heard of those. So essentially creating a common community of like-minded individuals, and essentially, so right now we have a Power BI community of practice, right? So we're bringing Power BI, we're bringing Microsoft in to educate folks on how to harness the power of Power BI, because without that, there's self-help, there's self-learning, self-paced learning. And so community of practice, I think, are really good because it creates like-minded people, but then it also gives you an advocate to say, if I have a question, I can reach out to you and say, hey, you may be further advanced in Power BI, but I can learn from those people around me instead of just trying to find it on the internet. Engagement, also what I call governance councils. So in order to break down the data silos and data democratization, I've used data governance councils in the past that effectively are there to say, whether it's by domain, right? Material or product, right? You've got finance, you've got accounting, you've got planning, procurement, supply chain, market, right? You've got all these people that are reliant on product. But if you don't bring them all to a council level and where decisions are being made against product, say you want to alter your product hierarchy. Well, it determines how you report your financials. It determines how you are what your forecasting models are, how you are marketing those products, right? If you're changing the brands. And so the governance council brings a collaborative approach to say everyone has a seat at that table, and it's a common vote to say, okay, if we change the product hierarchy, who's all impacted, and ensuring that they're informed and they're also consulted for those decisions. So I would say those are the two big ones that I feel like we've created. Stronger data literacy. We've worked with folks like Data Smart and things like that are tailoring trainings and specific items. But communities of practice is a good way to create advocacy for folks around. I think we've got close to 300 folks in our Power BI community of practice, right? And so effectively what that's done is it's a channel, it's an outlet for trainings, knowledge sharing, questions, blog posts, things like that. And then the governance council creating that collaborative breakdown of the data silos when things need to be made. Does that answer your question, or? Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the governance council or governance board. I feel like that should be the first step, but then I'm thinking there should, maybe you just need a champion.
Yeah.
Then get everyone on the same page. So with your experience, how did that come along?
It depends on the maturity of the organization, right? I have experienced both sides of it. I do think that you need a executive champion, right? You need someone that's going to be speaking or sitting at that same level to champion the fact that data is an asset, data isn't important. But in order to bring, then, I think you start with a champion and then you quickly follow that with a council to say, okay, we have a champion, but we want to ensure that all of these members or all these groups or all these departments are included in this journey, right? And essentially what that does is it eliminates the fact of saying, well, I didn't know that you were changing that. I didn't know that we were doing that with the data. I don't agree with this, that, or it eliminates them from being able to be siloed and saying, well, I'm just going to go do this without consulting my governance council or my steering committee. And so to answer your question, I think you have to start, my opinion is you start with a executive sponsor and then you very, very quickly follow it with a governance council, because as soon as you get that executive sponsor, you have a seat at the table, but then you have to quickly act to say, okay, who else needs to be brought in order to make this a collaborative decision?
Other questions?
You talked about persona, data owner. What has been your engagement model over time to kind of making sure that you're progressing against your 36, 48 months targets and everybody's engaged in contributing?
Yeah, I think data ownership is a huge element of it. And so currently we're focusing on identifying data owners, and then effectively within those data owners, there's data stewards, SMEs, data custodians, right? All your standard terms. But by creating those data owners within the business, right? They're non-IT folks. They are business-led individuals. We've effectively, that's one of our major steps for, when we talk about our data strategy, is data ownership and accountability is arguably the most important and the most critical aspect to maturing in any capacity, right? Because if you don't, it's going to stay an IT-led element, and effectively without ownership, there's no accountability to data quality, right? If there's no owner, who owns data quality? Who's responsible or accountable for the quality of information that's being put out? No one. Or it defaults back to whoever decides to get voluntold that, right? Like I've been in organizations where finance just gets thrown random stuff, and in my opinion, I don't know why finance would ever own location and plant and things like that. So if you don't identify those data owners, you're just going to be left with a hodgepodge of random people owning random things, and effectively no strategic collaboration going forward. So for me, ownership is one of the most critical pieces of a maturity roadmap, because once you establish an owner, you establish data quality, you establish a curation standard, you can establish a data marketplace, right? So when you establish a data marketplace, you need a data product owner, right? So a data product could be a table, it could be a schema, it could be a set of tables, it could be an analytic dashboard. But if you don't assign that owner, there's no rationale for folks to want to use that. There's no adoption mechanism for that product owner to say, okay, if I want folks to consume my data product, I need to be accountable for knowing, is it of high quality? Is it of high integrity? Is it protected? All those different things that I talked about. And so we're measuring that by not just, okay, we had 10 data owners, now we've got 20, right? Because there's really no measurement behind that. We also talk about the engagement with business users to say we've improved our data marketplace tenfold by increasing the adoption, increasing the usability, generating AI results, innovation. I like to talk about going from reactive to proactive, right? A lot of companies face issues where unless a ServiceNow or an incident ticket's raised, most of the time you don't even know there's a problem with your pipeline. You don't know that there's something going on. And so to transition that to say, okay, from a data observability perspective and using technology to proactively measure and using machine learning and things like that to address that before it becomes a problem, right? Before it's the end of the quarter and the finance team is freaking out because their dashboard is incorrect because the pipeline failed 2 weeks ago and no one discovered it until now, and now it's critical. And so I think that's another big piece of it, is really hyper focusing on how do you become proactive in a variety of different areas. I found that to be very successful as well.
It's funny, at some organizations, like the concept of data owner or steward is like a dirty word, you know, and you have to almost like rename it within an organization because it can have a bad reputation. But that's why I think it's so important, one, to have that executive leadership support, because you have to have folks hearing somebody espousing the value of why they're doing something like this and investing the time into being part of these kind of programs, but also why it's so important that you do have that different messaging to really give them the what's in it for them, because that's all critical in getting that buy-in for people to participate in these programs and take a sense of, hey, you know, the aspect of, you're already doing a lot of this, you know, and this is just a different lens for it.
Well, it's just educating them on what they're already doing, but, you know, is giving them the confidence of this isn't new or additional. It's just advancing what's already there. So, you know, my stance is I always try and leverage soft skills and communication skills and change management theories of how are folks going to react, you know, ADCAR, if you've done a ProSci assessment, right? Like, what's the awareness and the desire to move this, right? And really being realistic with, is the organization ready for this change? Is the organization ready or mature for, you know, a governance council? And that's why I said, like, not every organization is ready for a governance council, because governance councils take a level of accountability at the executive to set the stage and then followed by a governance council. So there's definitely no single way to accomplish this. This is the way that, you know, I've tried to leapfrog my way through the last 10 years of my career. And, you know, I get excited for the future of data, like I said, with AI and self-service analytics and machine learning. My wife calls me a total nerd because she thinks what I do looks boring, but I love what data can bring. I love the innovations with technologies and what's going on in the industry, and definitely excited to continue being a part of that. So.
We have time probably for one more question. If anybody has any other questions, yeah, go ahead.
So if you think about, place yourself in a very low maturity organization and thinking about getting a more formalized data governance, getting a data committee, I'm just curious what your experience has been from, what does that mean from an organizational structure perspective, the additional resources, because is it always just on top of the day-to-day? People will see it that way, but are you adding dedicated resources
Yes.
in any capacity, right?
Yeah, I think I always say you got to spend money to make money sometimes. And I think the importance of dedicating, whether it's an existing person, but you have a dedicated set. And, you know, I go back to incentivizing these people, right? Is you have to put it in their goals and objectives for the year to make it stick. Because if you don't, you're like, oh, it's just an additional thing, but I'm not being measured against it. And so for me, it's dedicated resources, right? Sometimes you need a dedicated data steward. And that's their only job, is to steward that information and making sure that you understand what do you want data stewardship to be, because it's a vast array of different things, and then incentivize them against that to say, okay, you're accountable now for this, and you're also being measured against it. To me, that's the most effective way to get their buy-in, is to. Sometimes you need dedicated resources. I think it depends on the capacity of certain individuals, or you know, there's a term and I can't remember it, but data, you don't necessarily make a data steward, right? Data stewards are not made, they're found. And so you can't force a business person to be a data steward, right? You can't force data on certain business folks. And so sometimes you do have to go and find a data owner, data steward, to direct the organization in that space.
We do tend to find organizations that are just getting started are definitely working within the resources that they have within, you know, in-house. I think, again, that's why it's important to have leadership support, because there has to be an understanding of why we would do something additional or differently than what we've been doing it. But it's so important to find those like change champions within your organization and get some quick wins with them, because then they often become the people that espouse the value more broadly throughout the organization. But I will say, like, for these organizations to be, for these initiatives to be ultimately what you hope them to be, you'll end up needing to put resourcing on it. But I do say most organizations that are getting started that we see from a one-on-one perspective are definitely using the people they have now and working within the constraints. It's really hard if you're just getting started to get the approval to bring in more people or, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time. I know we're at time.
We'll be around. Chad
Feel
will
free
be
to
around.
connect. Yeah, feel free to connect with me here or on LinkedIn. I love this stuff, so thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.